Hey people, lovely to have you with me as usual. Today's subject, right, is all about sales. And I'm starting to get the impression that as much as the recruitment industry needs to sell, and as much as the marketplace is one where the ability to be able to sell is a definite differentiator in terms of how you manage your desk or how you scale your business, I think we're in danger of overwhelming ourselves with content that revolves around selling. It feels as though almost everywhere we turn, there is somebody who is giving us advice about how we should be approaching things, how we should pick up the phone, the tools we should use, the tools we shouldn't, that cold calling is dead, that cold calling is alive and well, that LinkedIn is the way to go, that LinkedIn isn't the way to go. And it almost creates this overwhelm that if you pay too much attention to everything that is being said, it would be almost impossible to piece it all together to come up with a coherent plan. So because of that, I think there is perhaps justifiable a move away from, not more sales advice, And it seems as though everyone has got a soapbox to stand on to tell you how you should be doing it. And I'm not entirely sure that all of these people are coming from a place of positive intent to help you, as opposed to being in a position where they are seeking to be able to sell a product, a software technology solution, a methodology, or whatever else it may be. And I put myself in that group, right? Don't feel that I'm saying that I'm different. I do feel that there is a danger that on occasion I'm perhaps a little bit too forward with my suggestions as to what may be right, what may be wrong. But the reality is, folks, from a sales perspective, I think that we are in danger of looking at the wrong things. And if we're in danger of looking at the wrong things, it may be that you adopt certain tactics or you adopt certain ideas and they don't serve you as well as you would like them to serve you, because perhaps the groundwork hasn't been done to actually prepare yourself to be able to use the tactic effectively. Because I think there are 5 things that if you have a sincere desire to improve the quality of the results that you're getting from whatever it is that you do that you would consider to be business development, and part of the fabric of business development is selling, but also within business development is marketing. And some businesses do particularly well leading with predominantly marketing to be able to generate inquiries to start to do selling, and other businesses do really well leading with selling by using cold calling to generate appointments to then be able to create sales. So how you actually slice and dice your business development is very much down to you, your business, and how you want to position yourselves. And those of you who've been listening to the podcast since it started, you may remember the episode that I shared that was all about positioning and the importance of getting that right. Because when you get your positioning right, much of your messaging starts to look after itself. But what I really wanted to look at here was what I would consider to be those 5 incremental steps, the things to really think about that will help you to be able to build a meaningful BD, business development, strategy, and how you can weave your sales activity into that BD. And it's important that these things are done in the right order, piece by piece, right? The unfortunate thing is some of the early pieces sometimes get rushed because there is too much assumption that you kind of feel like you've already covered it. So if we take it piece by piece, chunk number 1, block number 1, gate number 1. I'm not even sure what to call it, right? Let's call it block. Block number 1. Make sure you have total clarity on what your product is. I'm often contacted by recruitment business owners who say, hey Jeremy, wouldn't it be great if you could come and do some sales training? We've got a group of people here who are really enthusiastic. They've got an appetite to be able to sell more. For whatever reason, they're not quite getting the results that they deserve. So could you come in and give it like, I don't know, a bit of a zhuzh, help them to be able to reignite their excitement for picking up the phone. And it's often closed with picking up the phone. Picking up the phone is probably the most daunting thing if you don't understand your product. Because if you don't really know what you're selling, and you're contacting strangers to educate them about the benefits of working with you, and you don't really get what it is that you do, you're going to struggle. And not many people are willing to turn to the boss and say, boss, I do really want to pick up the phone. I'm just not really sure what I'm selling. I don't really know what to say. And the boss thinks, well, let's get some training. I can't come into a business that I don't know and teach you about your product. So it's really important that you understand your product. You understand what it is that you're actually selling. What are the outcomes that you're generating? What is it you are providing that compared to, if we just go with the recruitment companies, if we compare that to all of the other recruitment companies that there are to choose from, why would they pick you? What actually is it about your product that makes it relevant to the audience that you want to be able to sell to? How does it work? What are the mechanics of it? If you were to break it down so that you could explain to somebody, this is what happens underneath the bonnet, how clearly can you communicate the simplicity of, this is how we go about finding people. This is how we're going to engage with them on your behalf. This is how we will capture the attention of more people despite the attention recession that we find ourselves in. So knowing your product requires a great deal of fluency with how you're able to talk to somebody about it. And you know that you know your product well if you're able to talk about it for 60 seconds and get somebody to be able to get it, or alternatively, book an 8-hour slot and deliver a full day of training on this is our product. Because when you know it well enough to be able to talk about it for 8 hours, to facilitate a workshop on how to be able to get the most out of your product. Like, can you picture that with a client? Imagine with a client saying, let's put together a workshop before we start working together so that everyone in the organization who is a hiring manager knows how to be able to get the most out of our product and our service. It's kind of how software companies work, isn't it? You sign up to a bit of software, good quality onboarding is to make sure that everyone knows how to be able to get the most out of it, right? Not many recruiters onboard their clients to help them to understand this is how you get the most out of our product and our service. Partly because many of those recruitment companies haven't really thought in enough depth about what their product or their service is to be able to create that kind of an opportunity. So once you're clear on what your product is, and you know what your service offering does, you know how it operates, you know how you would be able to sell that to somebody in a 60-second window, you know how you could potentially create a 4-hour, an 8-hour workshop to really walk through the granularity of getting the most out of it, then you truly know what it is that you're selling. Then you can define who your audience is. So block number 2 is having clarity on your audience. Who actually is going to buy it and why would they buy it? And as you think about your audience, that may be a certain profile of organization, that may be a certain level of decision maker, but if your product or service is designed to fix problems, it should definitely define those problems, and being a little more sophisticated with it, it should also introduce the concept of symptoms. The classic symptoms of the key problems that organizations face that we fix. And as you start to identify those symptoms that you link to those problems that you fix, it gives you so much content to help you with your marketing, to help you with your social selling, to help you with your video creation, to help you with your sales calls, to help you with your sales meetings. Because when you've got clarity on product and clarity on audience, the two things become like lock and key. How actually this product fits so well into that lock that it works. And it works and it delivers the results that you're looking for because it is designed to fix those problems. And you may not be aware of the problems that you have, but you'll certainly be painfully aware of those symptoms. So when you get block 1 and block 2 right, product, audience, you can then move to block 3. And that's process. What is the process that we will follow to be able to generate leads? And once we've generated a lead, what is the process we will follow to convert a lead into a meaningful, committed meeting? And what is the process that we follow to convert a meaningful, committed meeting into an onboarding of a client? or potentially the rejection of somebody who doesn't fit you, and vice versa. So when you map out process, and I think process is the sexiest thing that you can introduce to your business, and again, few organizations have process. And those organizations that have been built by hiring people who are experienced, I often find that if you have 10 experienced recruiters in your business, you have 10 different processes. And if you have 10 different processes and one suite of KPIs, you'll find that it is more meaningful some than others. And it starts to make you question, how am I actually going to help people to be able to get the most out of their own performance if everyone appears to be doing it differently? So when you create a structured process that you start to define as this is the way, this is our proven process through a series of agreed gates. This is how we generate leads, this is how we convert leads to become meetings, this is how we convert meetings to become onboarded clients. Process is so much more important than technology. Yet so many recruitment businesses run out there to buy a piece of technology without thinking about the process that it's going to sit on top of. They buy the technology and then they try and work out, how do we get the most out of this? And because they're now trying to work out how do we get the most out of the features, they're not thinking about the lifetime value of the technology relative to a process, which is how they end up with, I can't remember who coined the phrase, but I really like it. They end up with a Frankenstack. This chimera of different bits of tech that don't really talk to each other and don't really complement each other because they haven't been aligned to a specific process. So they get underutilized. It's almost like buying a Ferrari to pull a caravan, because you're now trying to work out how does the product work and how do we get to use it to best advantage without having predetermined the process. So if you're going to go out shopping for technology, think about the process that you want it to support rather than look for some technology and then try and work out how do we get the most out of it. Because you'll end up with buyer remorse. There are plenty of recruitment businesses out there who regret buying a piece of technology, yet for whatever reason they signed up to a 12-month contract. And as they signed up to the 12-month contract with positivity because of all of the features and all of the bells and whistles, they haven't worked out how do we make this become part of the fabric of what we do. So there is a challenge in terms of user adoption, there is a challenge in terms of consistency of user adoption, and there becomes a challenge in terms of being able to track back results that come from investing in the technology to start to justify the ROI on whatever that monthly payment is or whatever that annual subscription is. So if that resonates with you, if you've got tech in your own business that you are either regretful of purchasing or you still don't feel as though you're getting the most out of it, stop looking at the tech and start looking at your process. Get the process right, then you can start to adopt tech with more consistency. So those 3 blocks, some people might consider those to be the mundane parts of sales. Some people might consider those to be the boring bit. And because it's mundane or because it's boring, there's kind of this assumption that, well, we're good enough, right? We know what our product is. We're recruiters. We sell recruitment. But if you're going out there selling recruitment and you're competing against 50 other recruitment businesses who also think they sell recruitment, you've just created a cage around yourself and you're now trying to have a fist fight in a phone box with a bunch of people who are selling the same thing, when actually none of you are probably selling recruitment, because recruitment itself isn't necessarily the outcome that most businesses are looking for. So as you start to get more aligned to the true outcomes that those businesses are looking for, it'll help you to redefine truly what your product is. And then you're stepping out of the phone box and leave the other 49 agencies in the phone box to try and fight out. But as they're fighting with the inability to even throw a punch, it just starts to sound like a bunch of kids screaming at each other, pulling each other's hair. So the client may look at that and decide, you know what, I think we'll do it ourselves. If you haven't defined your audience, and again, definition of audience is something that many recruitment businesses think that they've done, yet when I get closer to them to ask them more questions about that profile of target client, about the ideal client that they want to do business with, about their definition of a decision maker and how they would identify a true decision maker, in the organisations that they're targeting? It's not really there, people. And it's not really there because they rushed its definition because they felt it was too simple a question, and because they're a specialist, they feel that their specialisation becomes the definition of their market. Yet there are plenty of people who are phoning prospects saying, I specialise in modular construction, not realising there are others who are saying the same thing. And some of them are just saying it and they don't do it, but they're just changing the words based upon the profile of organisation they're calling. And some of them genuinely do. But the fact that you specialise in modular construction doesn't automatically mean that every modular construction business out there is a prospect for you, because you can't serve the entire audience. And even if we got a little bit selfish about things, you do need somewhere to be able to go and get people from as donor companies. You can't be serving every single business and still deliver the quality of service that those organisations deserve. So as you think about your audience, I'd recommend that you do that in multiple sittings. Like, give yourself 10 minutes to just write down a load of stuff. Make no judgment on it and walk away from it. And then go back to it and read what you've written. Then extend it. And then walk away from it and go back to it again. Because you may go starry-eyed if you try and spend an hour defining those things, and too quickly you'll decide good enough is good enough. And in my experience, the definition of good enough is really good enough when people are defining that audience. And then when we look at your process, mapping out your process requires getting offline, in my opinion, and doing something which is using a pen, using paper, using post-it notes, and start to properly map out what actually is a process that we could follow. And let's look at how we can refine that so that it starts to become our proven process. And as we create the sequence within which we do things and the decision gates that we arrive at, if this, then that, or if that, then this, and we think about the amount of time that becomes the longest period of time we would want to go by. Like, for example, when you have a process to say, every lead that we generate needs to have received this email within 24 hours of lead generation, when it has a time scale, when it has an action, and when it has a step. When everything has step, when everything has action, when everything has time scale, and you start to build that out, it becomes easier for people to follow it, including yourself. It becomes easier to create accountability, and it becomes easier to start to be able to drive a more performance-orientated approach to doing things. So once those three things are done, then we get into the sexy stuff, or the world's definition of the sexy stuff. Process for me is the really sexy bit. But the sexy stuff that all the sales trainers seem to be talking about, every person and their dog seems to be talking about things like pattern interrupts for the beginning of a call. Can you imagine doing a pattern interrupt and saying, hey, I'm glad I've got you. I'm sorry to say this, but this is a sales call. You can either give me 30 seconds or you can hang up now. Imagine using that pattern interrupt without having clarity on what your product is, or clarity on who your audience is, or the process of what do you actually do when they go, okay, you've got 30 seconds. Because being explicit in 30 seconds, how are you going to communicate every single reason why you feel that that particular person at that particular moment should be paying attention to you? I find it gimmicky, but I can see why so many people clamour over it, and I can see why so many people are able to create an audience, because people look at it and go, whoa, look at that, that's ballsy, or that's so clever, or wow, what a different way to be able to do things. It's a tactic. And there is nothing wrong with learning good tactics. But if you put tactics on top of nothing, i.e. no definition of product, no real clarity on audience, no process in place, the tactics wash away like sand on a beach. And they don't serve you as well as they could or they should compared to if they become part of a process. So starting to develop tactics. The tactics become the things that help you to be able to define what does good look like, what does good performance feel like, and how do we start to tactically ensure that our process delivers the results that we're looking for. And when you get your tactics right, you can then put on top of that skill development. So a lot of the work that I'm invited to do is skills-based development, helping people to get better at a part of a sales process or part of a BD process. But when those businesses haven't actually defined what those processes look like, although their intent is to help people to become more skilled as salespeople, we need to invest a lot of time in ensuring that as an organisation there is total clarity on product, audience, process, and the tactics that sit within the confines of the culture of that organisation, so that the tone of voice actually represents the positioning that is being required. I'm not sure that there are many senior level exec search firms who would adopt the 30-second pattern interrupt as an introduction for a cold call to be able to set the right tone of working with them when they're dealing with jobs paying north of 500 grand a year. But hey, that's just my personal, yet ever so professional opinion. So wherever you feel you're at in terms of your development as a sales professional, it is always worthwhile a minimum of once every 6 months, and I would recommend quarterly, given how much volatility there seems to be at the moment in the economy, to be able to do a stock take of the clarity and definition of the product that you are selling today compared to the product that you perhaps were selling in the past, making sure that both you and the team have got that fluency to be able to present it in 60 seconds or be able to succeed in delivering an 8-hour workshop on it, that everyone has clarity on who the audience is for today and for the future, as opposed to the audience from the past, because there are still many people saying the marketplace is down, my clients aren't hiring. Well, perhaps the clients who you were working with in the past aren't necessarily the ICPs for the future. And if you haven't got clarity on your process, if it hasn't been shared, it's going to be very difficult to create self-accountability and for others to take ownership of what they're doing, and they'll end up relying on something called flair. Nothing wrong with having flair, but it is a very small step to move from being a flair-based recruiter to being someone who wings it. And if you are relying on winging it and flair, you're far more likely to end up following your mood rather than following your plan, and therefore start to generate more inconsistency in your results than you would probably like. And then we can finally look at tactical things and the skills that are required to ensure that those tactics serve us by picking the right KPIs so that we can truly look at what are the indicators of good performance following that process with those tactics that help us to be able to enhance the results that we get for ourselves, for the customers we work with, and the candidates that we engage with. So what have you got to wait for? That's the end of today's show. Perhaps you might want to lift up the bonnet, check out your product, audience, process, tactics and skill, and decide where you feel you need to point the spotlight with a little bit more intention.